incredibly flattered to be doing this today to hopefully entertain you all and indeed answer a few questions you might want to ask me, because there's plenty going on at the moment. I hope you haven't been impacted too badly by COVID, and hope as we go forward there'll be plenty of things for us to do, and we can return to some sort of normality. It seems absolutely horrendous at the moment for one and all. Well, you may or may not recognise me. Perhaps the most famous thing I have done was appear as a betting pundit for Channel 4 Racing, but also at the same time I was production secretary for Channel 4 Racing. But I'll have to let you into a secret. There was never any ambition to be in front of camera. I was just happy to just go racing every day. First started off, well, my background, shall we say, is really in bookmaking, on-course bookmaking, whether it be with greyhound racing or with horse racing. And I mean, I'm told by the family that my first steps, shall we say, on a race course were around 1973 at Royal Ascot. But then latterly in the 70s, I'd go more and more because there was no ability to find babysitters, and my parents had bookmakers' pitches all around the country at all various race courses, and indeed we had plenty of pitches at greyhound tracks as well. But my first memory with greyhound tracks, apparently I was in the pram of being babysat by greyhound paraders when my mother went out to parade a few dogs and that. So my background more so is in betting, which I love to this day. And yes, I do have a bet every now and then, thoroughly enjoy it. Nice to see you all. I'm getting some notifications in already. If you have any questions, don't forget to send your questions in, and I'll see if I can answer as many as possible. If you want to find out more about what I'm doing now, what I did in the past professionally, just email in. But as I said, I first started out within bookmaking, and right up until probably the mid to late 90s, I was standing up in pitches at Aintree, can you believe, and at Cheltenham. But for me, more towards my heart and the courses that I loved when I was standing up with the likes of Folkestone and Fontwell and Plumpton, indeed York as well. I was working at York for bookmakers as well as my family, and just thoroughly enjoyed it. I just love the figures and the percentages within betting, and just love those sort of things. Katie Ferguson, hiya, Fran, Jerry, Chloe, thank you for all sending me messages, but don't forget to send your questions. So I started off in bookmaking, doing all the clerking. Yes, this day and age, it's all worked out by computers, isn't it? But when I first started, I was doing it with pen and paper and working out the bets. I think it was a more relaxed way of life when I was growing up, in the fact that the education was becoming worldly wise rather than being a slave to what we have now, a slave to the computer generation and social media. I find it was much more refreshing when you became worldly wise and you were outdoors all the time, and being outdoors, being in the atmosphere of the race courses, seeing racing from a wooden stool on a bookmaker's pitch really endeared me to the sport, because you have a different kind of adrenaline. A result may well be impact you into whether you have dinner that night, or may well impact you to whether you'll be able to stand the next day, have enough money to stand the next day. Or it was just that kind of adrenaline rush, and just clerking, and through clerking, which is the means of facilitating writing out the bets, to find out your liabilities for when someone came in and had a bet. You learnt the form because you looked up to see where your liability was and your best chance of getting that liability beaten. And you found we firstly found that the pitches, bookmakers' pitches for us, the best and those which had the greatest turnover, were of course in the likes of York. They were in the likes of Chester, Aintree. We did have pitches at Cheltenham, but that was only in what is now the best mate enclosure. When we stood up at Cheltenham, I say we all the time, it's me and my father stood up at Cheltenham, There wasn't the stand that is now. It was the rickety old wooden stand. Sorry, Cheltenham. But you had, so if you go to favourite horses, mine will of course be those that helps the financial wise with the results. My preference would be jumps because of the longevity of the career of the horses and the familiar names and seeing your old friends there in, they're out. But once again, I was in the bookmaking world, and within that, I never had any ambition then to do anything to do with television. At the same time, during the late 90s, well, from 86 onwards, I started working in 86 part-time for SIS, which was the company that reported all the betting shows to the betting shops that you have now. So in the 86 and 87, I only did a couple of days part-time because someone went sick, and then 88 I did more and more days. So marry that to going to both churches. So not only was a bookmaker, I worked for SIS as well, but it was more of a case that where I went to SIS wasn't where, of course, where I had bookmakers' pitches. So that's where the knowledge of betting came. Progress that on, and come around 1997, Channel 4 Racing was looking for someone that knew something about betting, i.e. being a facilitator, helping out John McCurrick, who was the fantastic personality and person that I went on to work with for many more years. So in 1997, I joined Channel 4 Racing, but behind the scenes, and within 2 weeks, I became production secretary. And that role involves literally booking hotels, typing running orders, just being liaison to the courses, liaison to many of the regulators within racing, the race courses. So I got a good network, as it were. And then it was in March 31st, 2001, because I was Mac's runner for a few years, meaning that Mac would stay in the press room, John McCurrick, that is, would stay in the press room, and I would run out and get all the early odds, because in those days, the bookmakers would bet early. Say, for even example, this weekend coming that I'm speaking on, it's Cesarewitch weekend, and he would send me out a Newmarket, and the bookmakers on course would be betting early on the Cesarewitch. This is what the years we're talking and how it's progressed. That sort of thing doesn't happen. So the on-course bookmakers would have a long board, and they would be betting on the Cesarewitch. So my role would be because I was invisible, I would go out, take the prices down, and go back to the press room, give Mac an early show. And that role progressed because I was working Monday to Friday in the Teddington studios as a production secretary, getting in all the video clips, and as I said, typing up running orders, which is the skeletal template of what the show is going to be, liaising with the presenters, the race courses, the sponsors, literally a dog's body, as it were, literally doing everything, which was so much fun because it meant that I could be involved in racing every day. In the early stages with Channel 4, I was still in the evenings hopping down and standing up at what is now known as Central Park Greyhounds, but at the time was Sittingbourne Greyhounds. I was standing as pitch 1. As I speak anyway to you now, later on this evening, I'm presenting Racing Post Greyhound TV, Perry Bar and Newcastle, so that'd be fun. I'm loaded up with stats because I'll go on to something later what I'll be working on tomorrow on Saturday. But no, Mac and I, we had this fantastic relationship. And then in 2001, of course, there was that horrible scenario of foot and mouth. And I was answering all the emails sent to the show, behind the scenes, that is. I hadn't appeared in front of the scenes until Haydock on March 31st, 2001. And I was sat at Haydock behind the cameras in the Morning Line set. Derek Thompson was presenting, and I was just doing the tally marks and printing off emails. Should racing go ahead during foot and mouth? And unbeknownst to me, Tomo, I thought it was a commercial break. Tomo asked me, what's the percentage should racing go ahead in foot and mouth? And I just answered the percentage. And it wasn't until the programme ended that I came off and I'd realised that I'd actually appeared on the TV. Once again, there was no, because March 31st, the following week was Grand National weekend, and the family had a bookmaker's pitch there. So my only mindset was to be absolutely on song, totally on the ball for the Grand National, because I was the clerk for the Grand National. So you're writing down lots and lots of bets in pen, of course, working them out in your head, mental arithmetic. These days it's all done by a computer. And at no point did I think that I'd ever appear in front of the camera. It wasn't a second thought at all. And then I came back for the Easter weekend, which of course was Kempton. And Andrew Franklin, the producer of Channel 4 Racing, said, "Where's your laptop?" And totally surprised. Mac had gone away for that weekend. Simon Holt was doing the papers. And I remember distinctly that being conscious that you were being on TV was certainly terrifying. So my first official appearance was that Easter weekend at Kempton. And it took me ages to process being on TV, because for me, I was someone that was full of back chat, full of banter, brought up in the hard, sort of earthy area of the greyhound industry, which was fantastic. It was colourful, it was kaleidoscopic colour. Same applied to the on-course bookmaking camaraderie, which was so much fun, because it was kind of you were devoted, or you are devoted, because you go day in, day out, in any sort of weather, getting absolutely soaked. Kind of a recognition thing. And you learn about the horses and you learn about the dogs, and it's just fantastic. And you spend your time going around the country. This was bookmakers, and you go and meet all your friends. And then I made the transition to working for Channel 4 Racing, and it was kind of a little bubble, a totally different role, and a fantastic, enjoyable role. And I can't have been any luckier if I tried to have John McCurrick as kind of a mentor, and someone that I was on air with the whole time. He was eccentric, yet so sharp and intelligent, so witty, to the point, so encouraging, so mischievous, so much fun, that we were in our own little world. And I was back in my domain, which was, of course, with all the on-course bookmakers, and in the betting world, shall we say, that it was a home from home, total home from home, working for Channel 4 Racing. Well, and it meant that I was going racing all the time. So I went to some new courses. I went to air. Totally love air, whether it be the Scottish National meeting, whether it be the Air Gold Cup meeting, or any meeting at Hamilton, Newcastle, another one of my favourites, plate meeting, but Newcastle Racecourse, totally fabulous. Today, it might be quiet, yet when racing comes to any of these race courses, they light up with magic and atmosphere and enthusiasm, which I grew up with and hope to see more and more. And through all this, of course, other offshoots come. Very soon after joining Channel 4 Racing, I became a writer for the Daily Record, Scottish Daily Record, which was absolutely fantastic. I did a tipping column there every Saturday, and that lasted for quite a long time. I even wrote for the Racing Post. I wrote for the Racing Post for 5 years in the greyhound section, but unfortunately I did a little bit of sport as well, because I love all sports, not only horse racing, but because of working within the betting world, I'm minded to bet. Perhaps too much at some stage, but I bet on all sports and all horse racing. And also from Channel 4 Racing came the ability to be a pundit on the likes of Racing UK, which is now Racing TV, Turf TV, Betfred TV, William Hill Radio, I did a channel called the Sports Exchange. Every now and then these days I do Talksport 2 radio, and I just think that racing should utilize these windows even more because it's such a fabulous sport that it needs to. There's too much of the bad or the disagreeing in politics that's aired publicly, so that those that are uninitiated on the sport sees our dirty laundry the whole time, and so they'll walk away from the sport, whereas we should focus more on the positives of the sport, as well as, of course, there's negatives in every sport, but we should focus more on the positives and concentrate more on that, or shake those that continually being entitled or arguing such over things that could be sorted if they would work together, or you'd wish that they would come and work for you, or these people that are being petty for a day on course in the on-course betting ring, and then they really would see how gritty and hard-working those bookmakers are, and you just feel really sorry for those because they can't go and do their job at the moment. So from Channel 4 Racing, with plenty of mischief caused by me and Mac, a couple of things that I remember stood in Doncaster betting ring one day when Mac decided at the top of his voice he would shout out, "I hope Leeds United go down." That wasn't one of his better. And then he'd just turn around to me and said, "That was okay, female," and just chuckle away. Thanks, Mac. And that's what he called me, female. Many people thought this was a derogatory remark, or it wasn't the thing to be called in those in this current climate. But female, I told you where the derivation from it was, you would chuckle as well. First of all, I mean, he thought it was clever that he emailed, because I would field all the emails at Channel 4 Racing, and we'd get so many thousands through the year that it was so heartening that how many people were passionate, enthusiastic, whether the comments or observations were positive or negative. That was great. But also, I walked in on an interview with a newspaper, doing a newspaper with Mac, and he was coming out with his normal, loud and uh, eccentric comments, and let's say I didn't say a polite response to them, and that actually got wrote in, I think it was the Scottish Herald or one of the papers, which says "a female from Channel 4." So that's another reason why he called me that. But if you knew what I called him, you would be laughing as well. And of course, you knew that Channel 4 Racing ran its course, and the contracts. Channel 4 Racing was very lucky because these contracts for sport are very cyclical, and they don't often last for as long as Channel 4 did. I think I was on TV for many, many years, near on 15 years. I appeared in front of the camera as a betting pundit with Mac, and that is a complete luxury. And the contract has now moved to the excellent ITV Racing, to which I am very privileged to work behind the scenes. I do the stats for ITV Racing. So if there is anything important to come through, statistical, I try and work out certain eventualities before the programme comes. And then, of course, there's some eventualities you never can, because, of course, it's a live programme and eventualities are happening as the programme is happening. So, of course, tomorrow, remotely, for this year, a majority, I've done everything remotely because, like the majority of us, unfortunately, we haven't stepped on a race course since March or even before. So the majority of this year, I've worked remotely for ITV Racing, giving all these stats, and we'll do so again tomorrow as ITV broadcasts Newmarket, York, and of course Chepstow. We're going back over the jumps. ITV focus on the Persian War, which I hear there's a video of Persian War winning, but it's the Persian War hurdle at Chepstow, and I'll be really looking forward to what is like a marker, isn't it? Chepstow is the start, or the what you'd say the official start of the winter jump season. We really can't wait for that. And on Saturday I will be working remotely again, looking of course across to Newmarket and York, which we will have the Cesarewitch, and we can't wait for the second half of the autumn double. I don't know who you've got selected, but looking at some of the stats, it may be prudent, of course, to look out for those that have got some jump form, because Willie Mullins has won the last 2 run-ins, Nicky Henderson's won a couple of run-ins, but if you look at the winners over the last few years, they have quite a few of them have got jumps form, and it's just, I sit back and I can't believe it sometimes to think that I clerked for my father at Cesarewitch 30 plus years ago. I then obviously was a betting pundit worked for CIS, sending the betting shows to the betting shops latterly. Then I worked for Channel 4 Racing, stood there in a betting pundit, and now it's gone full circle to some extent in the fact that I'm doing the stats for ITV racing this weekend. And as I mentioned, later on today and once a week, I'm very, very fortunate to present Racing Post Greyhound TV. So I haven't gone away from any of the screens. I just do the greyhound racing because that's another great sport. I just love every track of greyhound racing, and of course have my favourite dogs there. Horse racing, if I'm asked for my favourite race course, well, that'll have to be Aintree. Second favourite course would be Newcastle and then York. Aintree, because we had a pitch there, and I've been going to Aintree since I was about, many, many years ago, since I was about 6. So, of course, it was a family holiday then. And where the bookmakers' pitches are, they're hard up against where our pitch was. Our pitch was 22, so it was hard up against when they'd literally come through the elbow. So you're virtually watching that head on, and you can imagine what a thrill, what an adrenaline rush that is to watch that sort of thing head on. And to me, I just long to go back to Liverpool again. I've been lucky enough to present the Grand Women's Summit for the first 2 years and found that really great fun and something that racing should tap into more, because there were so many good questions and interaction coming through from events such as that. And I also work for the Racing Partnership channel, so I provide a voice and commentaries for greyhound racing and do previews for horse racing up until a few minutes to the off on the Racing Partnership channel. So I will be covering racing quite often during the week, so 2 or 3 times a week. And then, as I mentioned, I do a little bit of talk sport. So as you can gather, I talk a lot, so it plays to my strengths. So I'm really, really fortunate in that. I mentioned my favourite race courses. It got here, why is racing so special and important to me? They've given me a crib sheet of questions. Well, racing has been my life, and I couldn't have come here so far now if it wasn't for racing. My whole life there's been some sort of strand of my life that has been involved in racing. Although I love other sports and I've gone to watch live sports, I've even been a volunteer at the World Cup cricket. That's in this country a couple of times. That was fantastic. If it wasn't for racing and the camaraderie that is brought, I wouldn't have had the confidence to move on and try these other things. It is so important. But then I have had the grounding of having a very supportive group around me, of, say, my family, in the fact that there was no pressure to achieve, as it were. It was just pressure it wasn't pressure, it was encouragement just to be happy and do what I want in life. And that's what I would say to many people. Favourite racehorses. I feel I'm a little bit of a villain when it comes to favourite racehorses, because I'm a bit of a mercenary. Racehorses would only be my favourite because they have helped not, if I was standing up, not go home with a losing day. I remember one day distinctly of the fact going forward that I was just got the bookmaker's license and not long had a bookmaker's license for a few years, and gone up to Aintree to stand up at what is the Beecher Chase meeting. And for whatever reason, I can't remember now, my father couldn't stand up, so it was me that was standing up at the meeting first time. And unfortunately, as a giddy youngster, as it were, you know everything, and I was standing up, and it was Young Hustler v Into the Red in the Beecher Chase, and I just took it upon myself to take on Young Hustler, and it was a liability, and we're talking about 20 plus years ago, of over £4,000 in the book. So I remember just standing on the fence, near the fence on my wooden stool, thinking, if Young Hustler wins, how am I going to ever pay that back, or get forgiveness for going down the book? And on that day, sorry, owner of Young Hustler, Nigel Twiston Davies, I was relieved that Into the Red won that day, and forever have a picture of Into the Red. Well, that picture of that final fence at Aintree with Into the Red just ahead of Young Hustler. There was another time when we had Kerry Orchid as a liability in what would have been the Fox Hunters at Aintree. I mean, and I think Kerry Orchid ran on really, really strongly to be second. And you can see how my horses are all involved around liability. Terriman was a real favourite of mine, because I remember they were betting at Canterbury Dogs. There's another greyhound track where we had pitch one Canterbury Dogs, and one of the bookmakers was betting on the Derby, and I took a ludicrous price each way Terriman. And the background to that was, I don't know if you remember, in the old days, the bookmakers' pitches, they had just paper sheets, and it was printed by Portsea Press. Well, on Terriman's debut, he never got printed on the Portsea Press sheet. He was, or where he was printed, for most bookmakers' joints, he was covered off, because as it dropped down, he was covered off. He went on to win that day, and of course, no bookmaker had laid him. So it always chuckled me. But he was one of Clive Bretton's horses, owned by Lady Beaverbrook, and he had ability. And I remember leaving a little each way bet on Terriman, and of course we know the history was the biggest price placed horse at the time in the Derby. Terriman, wasn't he? Finished place behind Nashwan. Fantastic effort. And from that, it sort of was the launch pad into me punting and taking more notice of the form, even though I was a punter in a different kind of way. When you stand up as a bookmaker, you're betting, you're left with the ones that the punters don't want to be on. So it's a different kind of outlook on racing. There's a note here, my biggest success to date. Well, it isn't in, if you're talking of racing, I'll go back to that in a minute. If you're talking about everything else, my biggest success to date was the ability to go and speak about my passion for the sport in the House of Commons. I've done that a couple of times, and that's the biggest thrill ever. If you're speaking about monetary, it was in Matt Every in the Bay Hill Classic, and I backed him. Many people thought it was Todd Hamilton in the Open, but subsequent to that, I've been even more fortuitous. I did back Todd Hamilton to win the Open at Troon, and I've also backed Matt Every twice to win at Bay Hill, which he has done. I do love my golf, so monetary-wise, Matt Every will be my biggest success. Monetary-wise on the horses, there are many successes of that, the likes of Sir OJ winning at Cheltenham, Frenchman's Creek, Dusty Miller winning at Cheltenham. I mean, they date back and forward. And yeah, biggest success today, as I mentioned, the House of Commons, but my biggest success today has been the ability to enjoy and live my life how it's played out. And I have never set out an ambition. I never had any ambitions to do what I've done. It's just unraveled like that. And I suppose I've been very, very lucky in that respect. And going forward, these days I own a coffee shop, and so although I'm able to enjoy racing as much as I do, and I look forward to going on a racecourse again, and I hope we all do. It's amusing that I am doing a kind of what's known as a coffee morning with you, because I am the joint ownership of a coffee shop, which has been a, a godsend in that it's been a wonderful distraction in these horrible, strange times, because all the admin work has not stopped just because we have been in lockdown, and all the work outside of the coffee shop, i.e. you have to get the right blends of coffees in, you have to get different teas in. I don't know what your favourite cakes are, you've had to get different cakes in. Your customers are your best guide, they give you a best guide to your menu. But learning all about being an employer or running a business has then gone back to help me appreciate what I've maybe can put or help or consult horse racing with again. Because you step out of the world and look back in at it, and you can see all the positive points about racing. And this is where I mentioned earlier, all the negative, and you think, like, looking at racing like a naughty school child, and you think, oh, you'd love to write a school report for racing, because you could get a good survey from the customers in the coffee shop, or what it thinks of the sport, and you could then go back and perhaps give it a kick up the backside, or give it some advice. But at the same time, you will never, as a naughty school child, you never ever fall out of love with racing, because I wouldn't be here now and speaking to you if it wasn't for racing. But once again, I see not too many questions have come in, but in the future, if you have got any questions, feel free to email them across to Racing Welfare, and I will send you any of the answers that you need back. It's been great wittering on for so long to yourselves. And as I said, what drew me into racing, I was lucky. It was in my family, it was in my blood, but it wasn't so much racing, it was betting. And to me, your whole life is a gamble. And every day I go out, I get what do you fancy here and what do you fancy there. My advice always is go by your own instinct, go by your heart, whatever method you use, and just enjoy racing and try and enjoy life. It is well worth it, and never, ever, ever say if only, because if I had left things behind and not done things, I wouldn't be where I am now. And I just long to get back on a racecourse, wherever or whichever racecourse that might be, because that's where my heart is, my heart pounds for. But once again, if you've got any questions going forward, don't forget, email through to Racing Welfare and I'll try and send the questions back to you. Thanks for listening, and if I've whittled on and switched you off, I apologise, but I thoroughly enjoyed it this morning. If you want me to speak about any subject matters going forward on any other occasions, I will do. But it's been great speaking to you. Bye-bye for now.